So this is the everything you need to Node. I guess that's the joke in itself. So I lied. But I walked in, and a few of you were like pretty content staring at a plain blue screen. So I think I have a pretty good crowd here. Not much to entertain you with. So I want to talk about what we're going to be doing. What are we doing here? So today, this is basically, we're going to talk really quickly about the usual suspects of what you would usually see people using Node for. And just touch on that lightly. How many people here use Node in production as well? Cool. You're trying. That's what counts. Next, we'll do an even more in-depth look at the unusual suspects. So these are the applications that we may not always think and realize that we can make with Node. And then we will do what you might suspect, which is actually write up a Node application of one of the unusual suspects. And it's actually kind of about a 5-minute process to write this application up. So I am the person talking at you, Tara Mniksik. I am a developer advocate at Progress, Google developer expert with the web technologies. And then I helped found the Cincinnati Women Who Code and Cincinnati Node School. That means I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. You may have gathered. Yeah. And I also am the program manager and guest host on a podcast called Always Forward with Disha. And that is a very Node-specific podcast, but we try to do it so it's the talking heads. So you can see all those people that you usually just see like their GitHub handle or their Twitter handle. You can see their faces, kind of get to know them more, and we all kind of converse with each other. And we try to get some of the top people in the community working on the topics that we're talking about. The one that I have coming up in November, it's usually the second Tuesday of the month, is on, I don't know if you're aware, but there was a Node Foundation governing Node, and there's also a JavaScript Foundation. And if you saw the keynote today, Jory Burson talked a bit about the JavaScript Foundation. And it's really, really exciting that we're all starting to go more towards kind of a standardization of everything to make it easier for us, developers, to use, and really get rid of so much of that anxiety around complexity that we tend to get with JavaScript. Nobody here has that, right? It's super easy, right? No? But I'm going to have all the slides up. I'll probably post a link to the code and the video from TZ Mannix on Twitter. But most importantly, that little bundle of weird, we'll talk about her a little more today because I put her in every single one of my talks. That is Toshma Ghosh, and she has really great cameos on Twitter, so I highly recommend it. People think that I'm pregnant, but I'm actually just carrying around Toshi in here, so don't worry about that. Okay, so we start out with the usual suspects. And I kind of joke about this, but when people talk about Node, you tend to think about microservices, backend, and backend microservices. Like, you don't really tend to really stray away too much from saying, oh, Node, yeah, that's JavaScript on the back end, right? Which is, it's basically a JavaScript runtime built on Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine. And there's also a Node Chakra is coming out it's been out for a while, for Edge, handling JavaScript. But Node.js has always primarily been used for non-blocking, event-driven servers because it's the single-threaded nature of it that makes it so prime for those kind of applications. And it's used traditionally for websites and back-end API services. That's where you'll see it. And you'll see it, it's very light and scalable, and it's a fast way to write scripts. So you'll see a lot of services that use Node. And that is always the typical thing that you see. Microservice architecture is basically a way to develop an application as a group of independent and small ones instead of the monoliths that you may see. So I started out as a Node engineer right out of, I was a non-traditional college student. I'm sure you wouldn't hear my jokes this morning and think anything about me was non-traditional, but so I actually started out working at the Atmospheric Research Group at Harvard and was able to take classes with their tuition assistance program. And if any of you are from this area or know somebody from this area, you're basically, if you get accepted into the extension school, you can get special student status as well if you have good grades, which as a former college business school dropout, turns out I'm not that dumb and was able to get special student status, but then you get regular Harvard classes for $40 a class. So, and MIT classes as well. Just putting that out there as a little life hack. But I started out as a Node developer working for Platform as a Service, building microservice architecture with Node. So that was always my mindset on it as well. And it wasn't until I actually moved to a job doing front end that I found all these other unusual suspects that you can build using Node, because I had to kind of dig in and see what would be really interesting to teach people about, especially for situations like Node School, people coming from jobs where they were building microservice architectures all day long. What else could we build for fun? So I'm going to hit these real quick because we're going to delve into each one on their each individual slides. But Node is basically, you can build real-time applications, games, machine learning. You can do machine learning on it. You can do universal rendering, file reading and parsing, and IoT. So these are the, how many are there? 6 topics that we're going to delve into now. Man, I just realized I did a lot of puns on these title slides too. But there's no pure jokes, so I didn't technically lie about that. So RealTime is really the spine of Node.js, which is why it's always really funny when I hear people say, oh yeah, backend, Node is just backend, you're just doing backend stuff, you're doing scripts. Because the creator of Node, Ryan Dahl, he was aiming to create real-time websites with push capability. Like, that was his whole goal. He saw that it didn't exist with JavaScript, and he wanted to and did give developers a tool for working on non-blocking, event-driven I/O paradigms. So being able to do so much without blocking was huge. And I mean, it was like 20 years of like stateless web-based on the stateless request response paradigm. So it was a huge step in basically what JavaScript could do for you. And then you could have applications with two-way connections. So you had that web applications with real-time. So you were doing a lot of connecting with multiple servers simultaneously. And this is really where Node.js shines, because you're employing push technology over WebSockets. So what exactly does that mean? A lot of companies really took advantage of this with their applications. So one that probably many or all of you have used is Uber. And one thing that was really, I think the number may even be more now, but when Uber started using Node, they were able to process over 2 million remote procedure calls, RPCs, per second. And so you can see how important that is when there's somebody, not that any of us have ever done this, but like stared at your phone watching the car move, waiting for it to come to you. And you're like, all right, it says 2 minutes, but you were supposed to take a left there. I know you were, you know? So we are kind of a demanding audience. So it's really great to have this capability. And Walmart first started with, I'm trying to, I always say Aaron Rodgers as soon as I think of him, but Aaron Hammer, it's just the season. Aaron Hammer was at Walmart Labs and implemented Node on their stack for their store during, like, right before Black Friday, because they would get hit so hard every Black Friday, and their servers just weren't up for it. So he started using Node for them, and immediately the first year they started using it, it was just seamless. Their website did not crash once. So it made a huge difference for them. And you also see it with LinkedIn and PayPal and eBay. And Node.js is such an excellent resource for streaming applications because it has a native stream API. So it has an interface of readable and writable streams that can be processed and monitored really easily, very efficiently especially. And it's they're basically like Unix pipes that allow transmitting parts. So Netflix uses Node and has had a lot of success with Node. So those are all companies and NASA. I haven't really looked into what NASA is doing with it, but I'm sure it's amazing. So away from the serious things, since it's an event-based architecture, it works really well with WebSockets. So there's actually 2 people, and you can go to this site. I didn't do it live because I didn't fully trust all of you. But you can go in there and basically, with all your friends, there's another one. Let me open it up real quick because I think I can get my camera and play with you all on it real fun. So, do I need to drag over there? So don't mind the name, but it's chat.meet space. Let's see. Will you let me drag over? And it's a really funny and addictive chat thing where, it doesn't like my camera, maybe? But I would highly recommend checking it out. It was working with my camera just yesterday. Oh, there it goes. So you basically type something in. Oh, I don't want to be that jerk that just says nothing. And then you press send, and you can send a little GIF. And that's how you communicate with people. And when this is years old, but it's really fun, and it's like chat.meatSpac.es. And for some reason, it's really addictive and fun. But it's just built a simple WebSocket Node application. So they have all these fun parts to it, right? So that's one of the biggest things is being able to exchange messages between the client and the server with these open connections. So we saw the big benefits for those big applications. So this is like kind of just the skimming the surface of everything that you can do by installing and using WebSockets. It gives you real-time chats, and because Node has an asynchronous and event-based architecture, it's really great for collaboration apps. So anytime that you want to make sure that you're working with a team, you want a good seamless connection, you're able to use Node and WebSockets. So speaking of these fun things, you can also build games with Node, which is quite unconventional, but Node does a really great job at doing complicated single-page applications, SPAs, because it's really efficient in handling asynchronous calls and heavy I/O workloads. So the way the event loop works, it actually allows you to delay multiple concurrent requests from the client. And that works quite well for games. Really complicated data-driven games like the T-Rex game from Chrome. So not really, but it's funny because you have so many capabilities with an application or with Node to do things like games. But then there are always these really simple, really funny, weird games because nobody really wants to be building games on Node. Hence why it's an unusual suspect of Node. But if you want to, it's a really great way to introduce yourself to WebSockets and doing that real-time application with games. What's really exciting is the push with machine learning, and Node, and specifically with TensorFlow.js. There are multiple JavaScript libraries, but even the creator of Node, Ryan Dahl, made a machine learning language called Propel. He put all this work into it. It was all open source. And then one day I was like researching to have a machine learning show and have the people from TensorFlow.js and him from Propel. And it, the beginning of the Propel page was like, yeah, TensorFlow.js is where we should be focusing our efforts, so we're stopping working with Propel and just focusing on TensorFlow.js. It's like, okay, good to know. So, but TensorFlow.js is really great. It's a JavaScript library, and it allows, because TensorFlow is in Python. So the TensorFlow.js is JavaScript, but you're basically using it for training and deploying machine learning models in the browser and on Node. So there are a few things that aren't allowing us to fully go seamlessly from front end and back end in using JavaScript and Node, but the TensorFlow library helps you do it much easier. And I have to highly recommend this article from Minko Genchev, who actually just joined, or I believe rejoined actually, the Angular team. But he did this article on playing Mortal Kombat with TensorFlow, and it's really interesting. He did a few things in this. He collected training data for image classification, performed data augmentation using ImageAug, I think is how you say it, transfer learning with MobileNet, binary classification, and N-array classification. He trained an image classification TensorFlow.js model with Node and used it in the browser, and then also did things with classification with LSTM. So I feel like when he gets into a project, he really gets into a project. He actually started with this beforehand, doing kind of input this way, and then ended up doing it. So like when you see the full product in his blog post, which I'll post all of these online and they'll have the links, it's just extremely impressive how quickly he was able to do it. He just got a bunch of different images to train the model of like people punching, people ducking, people kicking. But I mean, he also just got to play with Mortal Kombat for a really long time, and so that just sounds lovely. But a lot of machine learning you can do with JavaScript now, or with Node and JavaScript nowadays. So Node is also taking over the universal rendering side. It's really exciting to see how much we're able to do more of our workload on the server. And Node really plays a hand in that. So I have 3 articles here that really focus on getting you comfortable with what's happening in server-side. How many people do server-side rendering here? Nice. It's not the easiest thing to do. So I feel like we have such great resources with the framework and JavaScript frameworks we have out there. So being able to kind of step into the realm of server-side rendering with Node, with JavaScript, makes it a lot easier to basically take advantage of everything that we can do. So the first one is from Airbnb, and it talks about their steps that they took to really optimize everything that they're doing with their different Node processes that they're using. It's a very, very in-depth article, but if you start to realize that you need to optimize everything that you're doing to get information out there better and faster and easier for users, this is a great place to dive in first. In the Vue.js documentation, they actually have a whole section on server-side rendering that talks about basically being able to get yourself familiar with doing development, server-side Node.js and Webpack to do a lot of your server-side stuff. But they really put in a lot of effort to kind of walk you through in their documentation, which is really nice that you don't have to go hunting around in the, using your Google Foo. The next one is talking about server-side rendering with Angular. So this article basically goes step-by-step in implementation of the server-side rendering and has examples in it as well. Very handy things. Many people don't think of this automatically, but Node has one of the best file system libraries and does just a really, really great job with parsing and reading files. So one of the articles I have here is just talking about parsing JSON files with Node, but your CVSs and JSON files, Node was made to just plow through these things for you. And so we used to do a ton of scripts with Node, again, back to scripts. But I always forget to focus on the fact that their file system is so robust. And they keep working more and more with it, trying to make it better, trying to make sure that not only can you work asynchronously, but you can also work synchronously with it, and get it to do so much, because we're working with files every single day, right? So it's something that is very important to utilize Node for, because it just handles everything really well. And I actually had the opportunity to have a few of the core members on the show, including, and now I cannot remember her last name for the life of me, but Anna, here on the far left. She does a lot of work on Node Core, and she really delved a ton of time into the file system because she was interested in making it even more, optimizing it even more. And Node 11 LTS just came out, and a lot of her updates are on there for the file system. So I highly recommend any file work you do, checking into Node first to see if it's something that you can work with. My favorite part is IoT for you and me. Are many people out there working with IoT these days? Nice, of course. Yeah, and if you haven't checked out Macy's game out in the hallway, it's really awesome for Meow Meow games. But so one of the biggest advantages of using Node is its ability to process multiple concurrent requests and events emitted by thousands and millions, or millions of devices on the network, which is basically what IoT does. It dumps a whole bunch of data at you. So one of the best ways to handle that avalanche of information, all the requests, is working with that event-driven architecture, the asynchronous processing that you need for IO-heavy operations. So that's what makes Node a really fast application layer in between the devices and the databases that you're using to store all of that information. One of my favorite microcontrollers, and I highly, highly recommend this microcontroller for anybody getting started in IoT. It's the Tessel, now on a Tessel 2. Well, they have been for a few years now. But this is a literal plug-and-play microcontroller. So you can see here, this is the microcontroller down here, and it has one of the built-in modules. So there's the actual physical module that they'll send you that has all the plugs in that you need. But then they also have the code modules that you just use NPM to install, and then you have that library where you talk to the module in Node. But all of that interfacing, they take care of that for you. So not only are they sending you the actual physical parts that you don't have to worry about, they're also giving you the code as well. So you can get a lot more done very quickly. And these are actually, Tessel is an open source project that just has volunteers running it. So help is not easy, always easy to come by, but their documentation is really well done, and they have a lot of projects that you can look into. And there's also have these people out there talking about them all the time. So I have a talk at OSCON where I basically took 2 different types of sensors for the microcontroller. One that came with it and had the module, and one where I built my own module and soldered my own sensor for it. I will tell you now, though, in person, I was supposed to have a plant to test the moisture of, but my flight got delayed and there was no place to get plants. But I found out if I stuck it in an apple, it worked just fine. So now you have the explanation of why I'm sticking sensors in apples on the stage here. But that's a really great device to get started with Node in IoT. And also a very popular one here is also Johnny5. You can find them at johnny5.io. And again, they're basically utilizing Node to help it be easier for you to understand what's happening with what you're creating. And they have a really great tutorial system online. And again, you're just installing their library and using NPM and Node to build these things out. They actually, Jory, who is here in the keynote, she used to be the COO for the place that started at Boku, who is based here in Boston. So if you're from here, you're allowed to choose Johnny5 then if you're from here. Just saying. But next, I want to then now just start diving in. So we're going to do some coding here. I decided that RealTime, I really wanted to focus on it because it's like, this is really the big part, you can get a ton of stuff out of RealTime. It's very important. It's like the top of what you can do. So of course, I just made an application where everyone can look at pictures of my dog. But I made it into a PWA since this is a mobile conference. Michael, I don't know if you saw, he had a talk, I think at 11:40 about progressive web apps. Is anybody here using progressive web apps now? Okay, that's okay. You can change. But I love progressive web apps. I'm a huge fan of them because they bring your web capabilities to give you more on mobile devices. Since, as I'm sure all know here, everybody pretty much has a mobile device. The thing about progressive web apps is they try to make it more accessible by giving you things like offline rendering and service workers to really help, because we may all have cell phones, but we probably don't all have LTE around the world, or 4G. We may not always have connections, and that's like one of the best things about native mobile is it doesn't matter if you have network connection or not. So progressive web apps try to bring more standards of responsiveness and accessibility and reliability to your website to be able to stretch that work you've done on the website and give you mobile performance. So I have to preface, though, I was just talking to one of the, Chris Fritz, who I think he had a talk earlier today, one of the Vue core team members. I built this progressive web app with their progressive web app template, which is actually now they have on their Vue Create the ability for you to actually just use their CLI specifically and pick PWA functionality from the menus of that. So disregard the first 2 minutes because it's us using the PWA template. But so we're going to seriously do this whole thing from scratch. So again, this is the part where I'm using, this is recorded. I'm not like just typing without my hands, right? I was going to live code, and I was like, I don't feel like torturing you or me today. So this is walking through the setup of creating that Vue application with the PWA template. And so that's just a few information. I always say yes to testing. Whether I ever actually do it or not, I'm not telling. So we go into the project directory, and we install everything, which, again, the magic of video. Look how fast NPM is. Nice, right? Then we go inside, and we start to work on the files. The first thing that I like to do is go straight to the templates and work on the app.vue file, which is just basically changing the title that is already existing in there. These are called Toshmojis, for Toshi emojis. I'm very creative. And then we want to put this new component in, and this is the chat component that we're creating. So we just change a few things around to make sure that we bring in the right component, And we're just single component. This is a pretty straightforward, simple thing. I kind of breezed through all of the styling because one, CSS is not my forte, so I don't really want you to see everything that I'm completely hacking together. But also, we're not here to learn CSS. So the next thing we'll do is change the name of that component. And this is with nerd tree in Vue. It's like, how do you know someone uses Vue? You don't have to, they'll tell you. Or Vim, sorry. So that's nerd tree for Vim to just basically change that component name into chat. So in here's where we're going to be doing all of the work to display all the messages here in this section by doing a v-for, taking in all of the messages and displaying who they're from and the person's name, as well as the image that they chose at random. Then we have the submit button down here for when you want to add more things to the chat feed, all binding to view models and just doing regular buttons. Once that's basically the end of the template, that's all we have to do in the template completely. And next we want to bring in I/O from Socket.io client, which we install with npm, and specify the user message and messages, and also say where our I/O socket is going to live. Under that, I'm just throwing in a bunch of file names for the images. And next we'll be doing methods for sending the message to Socket.io, and that's when we just emit, and then we call it send message, and send that user and message and randomize it with that math.floor.random. Then we clear message and look for that lifecycle of mounted. And then we tell this, when there's a message coming through to Socket.io, add that with the spread operator to all of the messages with its data. So again, more styling. But while that's going on, basically you're just saying, here's what happens when you send, here's what happens when you get a message, send this information and match it up, and then display it. So that's pretty much everything that we had to do for the client side. Next, we're going to create a server directory. And inside a server, we're going to create the index.js file. And this is all of the node part. And it's very quick and very simple. And basically, this is us creating that server, that Socket.io. And first, we need to just initiate that file, give it just a complete random information that goes inside of your package.json. And once we have everything in there, we can open up the index. Oh yeah, we install Express in Socket.io. Express isn't particularly necessary, but we're going to add it for now. And then this is the whole file to make this real-time chat work. So we bring in Express and make our server, tell it what port to listen on, and make sure that we have it telling us, okay, this is how I know you're ready and you're listening, because you console log this out. Then we bring in I/O, and we pass in the server, and tell I/O that on this connection, you're going to get a socket, and I want you to tell me what that socket ID is, just for sanity's sake. Then, when socket is on, we're going to send the message with that data, or on send message, we have that data, and we'll emit the message with the data. And that is pretty much it. So I know that that was a decent amount to take in, but when you think of it, if you look at this file, the majority is basically bringing things in and console logging. You have a few requires up there. You're declaring a port, which you can do a process end for that port as well. And then this is really where the chunk is. And all you're basically saying is when you get a connection, you're going to have a socket pass through. Here are the things that you need to do. So it's extremely straightforward, quite not complex. And the view side of it, again, we basically just handled it with event listeners and methods on those event listeners. So let's see what we have. So you can go to this as well. This code here, do I have it open? Sorry. The code also is at github.com, tzmanix, tosh my gosh. But I have it open, and I think I have that window open for you. Yeah, so you can go to this site, and probably faster than I can at this rate. On your mobile device, it should all be responsive and nicely done. And then you just basically can type your name here, which mine will always be in emojis. And just pick random Toshoji. Is anybody else on there? Once you get on there, your thing will show up. If everybody behave though. Somebody get on there, but everybody behave, because it would be really weird if you got beat up by a pregnant lady at a tech conference. I can go on with my phone too, but nonetheless, I can move this so you can see the link again. So this is basically anybody who goes to this link, if I could find my mouse, will be feeding to that same feed. So it's a way for you to basically communicate in the same spot. And like I said, this is very, a highly technical, very serious application. But you can imagine all the things that you could do with the possibilities of everybody being able to, there we go, communicate on here. Good. So you can see as people are posting on there, and when I post, you're able to get that all coming through to your feed. You're welcome for all these adorable images, too. But so it was just, that was 5 minutes of coding. That would obviously be more if you actually didn't have the video magic of using npm install on fast forward. But the code was very simple. And I highly recommend checking out the GitHub and messing about with it yourself. Feel free to have more fun with your Toshojis today. But here is the link, and I will be posting all of the slides from tzmanix. So thank you all very, very much for your time. And please feel free to come up and talk to me about Node or Toshi. Thank you.